It's the Self-Defense Report podcast with Jim Bunker and Phil Elmore.
Hey folks, welcome to another great video here at the Self-Defense Report. Keep in mind the Self-Defense Report is a podcast, but it's also a group. We're on Facebook. You can find us under the Self-Defense Report podcast. And Phil and I started this. By the way, I'm Jim Bunker, and this is...
I'm Phil Elmore.
And we started this group because we really wanted to help people with self-defense. So this week we're going to be talking about, or tonight, or however you want to categorize this episode.
In this segment,
we're going to be talking about toxic masculinity and all of the things that go with that. So Phil, do me a favor. Can you preface this for us? Because I know you've looked in quite a bit, and you actually wrote an article about this.
There's this trend. I mean, the topic of toxic masculinity, the term, has become very popular of late because it's very fashionable to crap all over not just men in general, but masculinity as a concept. The most recent nationwide example was that horrible Gillette ad, which, you know, everyone on the other side of the aisle was like, well, why do you have a problem with the Gillette ad? If you're not one of the bad men, you shouldn't have a problem with that ad, right? And of course, what they're overlooking is that ad attempts to redefine as somehow toxic a number of perfectly normal behaviors. One of the worst examples of which is guy sees a pretty girl go by. He goes to walk after her to say hello, as men have been doing for millennia. And his friend is like, whoa there, chief, not cool, because we don't go talking to pretty girls, which of course we do, unless, you know, you're not into that kind of thing, I guess. Unnamed guy in commercial. But it's a symptom of a greater problem, of a wider problem, and that is that masculinity and male sexuality have been redefined as vices, as something bad, as something to be looked down on and even changed and reconfigured and redefined. So there are all these think pieces that I've seen in multiple web outlets recently, some of them even like outdoors adventure blogs and outdoors products companies and stuff like that. All of these outlets are writing articles about the obsolete masculine skills that you just shouldn't bother with anymore. All this manly man stuff that it's really outdated. You don't need stuff like that. Things like, you know, being able to fight, being able to repair your car, you know, taking the initiative and being a leader. That's all what, you know, the toxically masculine, you know, your primitive Philistine forebears. That's how they thought. Today's modern new male, he doesn't think that way. You know, rather than learning to hunt, you should instead learn to code. Things like that. You know, just utter nonsense. Written by and expressed by and believed by people who think they are smarter than the people who came before them, and therefore the things that have always been the definers of masculinity, they don't apply anymore. This is a weird reference, but it just bubbled up from the annals of hours of television that are soaked into my brain. Years ago, I used to watch the television series Fame, which you may or may not remember. And if you're under 30, you've never seen it probably. But I remember there was an old professor and a young student, and the young student is complaining about like stringed instruments and classical music. And he's like, you know, with modern technology, with synthesizers, all that stuff is just so many dinosaur tracks. It's all obsolete. None of it matters anymore. And I forget the professor's exact response, but he's like, dinosaur tracks, you should be so lucky as to make those obsolete noises with these obsolete instruments. And for whatever reason, that stuck in my head as sort of symbolic of the arrogance of youth, that, well, if it's old, it can't possibly be anything good. It can't have anything to teach me. And, you know, today's modern millennials, they know everything. Just ask them, they'll tell you. And, you know, they love to put down those stupid boomers, you know, and my father is from the baby boom generation. I'm actually from Generation X. But basically, anybody over 35 is a boomer to the younger generation. And it's an insult. It basically just means you're old. Yep. You're an old person and you're stupid because of it. And you ruined the planet. And I can't buy a house now because of you. And
it's
tiresome. So
You know,
that is
and
the wider cultural thing that I'm reacting to.
sure, sure. And I will tell you, I mean, we both commented because in the Defense Report podcast group on Facebook, you would have seen, if you remember, there's an article in there about some gentleman who spent, I want to say it was over 50 days in the woods camping, and he didn't take a knife, and he didn't need a knife. And I'm happy for him. I'm absolutely happy for him. But I will tell you this, that would come as no comfort to the women that were raped on a bike path that I used to patrol when I was working. You know, I would get in my squad car and drive down a bike path at night looking for predatory animals, because predatory animals don't come with just four legs. Many of them come with two legs, and they arm themselves with all kinds of unique things. Axes and hammers and broken bottles and knives and large nails, you know, the type of railroad spike that you would find along the railroad tracks, which literally just gets shook free as a train comes by over the years. And, you know, people, many homeless and many mentally ill people, will arm themselves with those types of things and will use those when they attack people. Okay, here in Wisconsin, recently we had a young lady who left her job at the largest trauma center that we have in the state, and she went out to get in her vehicle, and she was approached and attacked by a gentleman that used to be a valet at that hospital. And after he hit her multiple times, he knocked her to the ground, where he continued to hit her and stomp on her until she was near death, and she crawled underneath the vehicle, where she was found hours later frozen in her pool of blood to the ground, because it's wintertime in Wisconsin. It was brutally cold at that time. They got her into the number one trauma center of the state, her hospital she worked in, and she died.
Mm.
And it's a horrible, horrible crime. But let me tell you this. Any person that has ever prepared any type of food with a knife, a paring knife, any type of kitchen knife, or a God forbid you actually go to a tactical folding knife, like the $5 version you can buy at a flea market, anyone can protect themselves with that type of weapon. And I know that there's these things that are said in self-defense. Well, if a woman pulls out a knife, a man's just going to take it from her and hurt her.
There is this obsession among people who have no training and no experience with weapons. It's just going to get taken away from you. They're going to take it. They're going to use it against you. No, they're not. And in the overwhelming number, there's some statistic floating around. It might be from Gary Klecker. It might be from John Lott. But in the overwhelming majority of cases of people, even people with no training who've used knives or firearms to defend themselves, their weapons are almost never taken from them. Because if you think about the reality of it, somebody's holding a knife and they're trying to stab you with it. Are you going to take it? Are you going to Bruce Lee your way through that? No, you are not.
And, the reality is, I've been teaching female self-defense, on the side, many times gratis, other times for very low income to get people into the class. And I will tell you, I run into it from time to time. I run into people where I ask them, would you use a weapon in self-defense? And many times I hear that I could never hurt somebody. I would never hurt somebody type of comment. And I respect that, because I respect your right to do whatever's right for you in your situation. If you're that person, I would say harden your target to the point that no one's ever going to look at you. Make sure you have motion detecting lights. You have dusk to dawn lights. You have an alarm system. You have a big dog, or many little dogs that bark all the time at anything that scares them. I think they're great burglar alarms to have, but you actually have a burglar alarm, and then you have some means of fighting back if you can't use a weapon. But usually, when I ask that question and someone says, no, I couldn't hurt someone, I wait. And then I get the caveat. Well, my mom is 70, and if they were going to hurt my mom, I could probably do it. Or if he was going to take my little girl, I could probably do it. And I'm sorry to tell you, folks, but look at your local area that you live in. Do a search. I can tell you, here in Wisconsin, we've just had the situation where this 21-year-old boy went in and killed both of the parents in the house and then abducted the 12-year-old girl. I want to say her name's Holly Kloss. That is not a unique story. There's a story of a pedophile that kidnapped a 16-year-old girl and killed her mother, her brother, and her dog so that he could do that. And the police found this girl after some very observant people who were riding horses saw that they were camped out, and they went to the campsite, and the police actually had to kill this guy, which, applaud, good for them, that they took care of business and they got that little girl back. But I'm just telling you, look at your local area, do a search, and you tell me how many bad things you can find in your local area. I can find multiple serial killers in this state. There's a serial killer that I found just doing a class. I was just doing some research. It's an older woman, about 70-year-old woman, and she literally just snuffed out like 3 or 4 kids when she was younger because she was babysitting children. She just couldn't stand for kids to cry, so she would smother them to death. Oh. And she did about 3 kids in her life. She's a serial killer. That's all there is to it. And crime like this comes in different fashions. So to the article where this gentleman said, if you carry a knife for self-defense, you're just going to hurt yourself. I call bullshit on that. And the reason I do is because I've stood over bodies of people that were killed with very, very simple, common kitchen knives. As we started this conversation before we started the episode, I was telling Phil, I literally observed a woman take a meat cleaver to her arm because she was distraught. And she had just killed her boyfriend, and the other officer and I were trying to save his life. We were in the midst of doing CPR when she grabbed the meat cleaver and sliced herself open with it. I'll spare the details because I don't know that you want to listen to that, but literally sliced herself open with this, and I went into the operating room with her because she was a homicide suspect, and I couldn't take eyes off of her. And literally you got to sit there and watch as they repaired that muscle belly. So just understand, massive amounts of damage can be done to the human body on accident or on purpose with any type of knife. We're talking about a really, really basic type, like a paring knife, ended this gentleman's life. I literally, was trying to save his life as he died. So just understand, when you see these things where they claim that, these skills are no longer needed and you should learn how to code. Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic. You should learn how to code. Good. Build something up. But if we have an EMP strike in this country and we lose, the electrical ability to do anything with technology, your ability to play a game on your cell phone or, your YouTube channel is going to be pretty useless to you. Well, your skills with knives and being able to start a fire out in the woods and provide for your family with a gun, that might be more useful.
It doesn't have to be the apocalypse. It could just be that the power was out for 3 or 4 days. I remember when Superstorm Sandy hit New York and those pictures were floating around of like extension cords plugged into 5 or 6 other extension cords plugged into, 20 or 30 people's devices that they were charging because they were just desperate to get some juice so they could get online. Mm-hmm. And, they think about the whole world. We spend all day connected to all these electronic devices, and the modern world is great. I love it too. But all of it can be taken away. All it takes is one outage. Facebook went down the other day for like an hour, and people were flipping out. Mm-hmm. It's just, I don't understand why we have to construct these think pieces about, don't learn this old skill, learn this instead. Why can't you do both? Like, why is it well, I know the answer. The point is, the reason people write articles telling you that you don't need to learn traditionally masculine skill XYZ is because they know they can't and they feel insecure about that fact. So they write these think pieces in order to make themselves feel better about the things they're insecure about. They denigrate toxic masculinity and they denigrate these barbaric old style men because they know they're weak and it bothers them. And deep down, they know that since being not weak is not an option for them. They need to then redefine masculinity and say, well, toxic masculinity says that it's not okay to talk about your feelings, but according to the way things are done now, it's okay to constantly talk about your feelings, talk about nothing but your feelings, whine and cry about every little thing, and weep online about how you suffer from crippling anxiety all the time. I don't know when every single person in America under 30 suddenly decided they had crippling anxiety, but all you have to do is look at any meme aggregator, and half the memes are about that. I just can't. A tremendous population, a tremendous section of our population just can't even. And it's weakness. It's celebrating weakness. And we're not going to get better. We're not going to improve until we start making fun of that again. The only way to make it stop is to ridicule it. Who knew that all those bullies were doing us a service back in the day? We have all these programs that stop bullying now. I don't know, I think it's not cool to bully anybody anymore. I don't know if it still happens. I'm pretty far removed from my high school and junior high days. But, back in the day, yes, everybody got bullied and bullying was bad and it was very unpleasant. But it also toughened you up and taught you that you had to deal with people who were unpleasant,
I do. I totally understand. So, folks, in wrapping things up for this night's episode of the Self-Defense Report podcast, I just want to mention to you, keep your eyes up and open. We are nowhere close to shutting down the acts of violence and terrorism that are going to continue for probably my lifetime and yours. So if you see something, say something. Pick up the phone and call the police. Let your local sheriff's department know that you're seeing things. Bad guys operate off of a plan. Most times they're checking things out. If you see somebody in your neighborhood that doesn't look right and doesn't fit, and let me tell you what a criminal looks like. It's not their race. It's not their sex. It's their actions. If they don't fit and they look like they're doing strange things and you don't understand why they're doing it, and like some of these videos that we're seeing now from the Ring cameras where people are, or the outside of surveillance systems, people are out there stealing packages off of your doorstep, and I've seen a couple of them where, the person says, "Hold on, I'll be right there." And then the guy literally puts the package down and goes, "Hey, I was just wondering if you had some work in your yard here." That's a bullshit response. The crumpled up piece of crap, note, we were going to clean carpets. No, those are trolls. Those are people that are trying to figure out what you've got in your house so that you can burglarize you. So the best response in that situation is to have a very loud dog barking at the door, to not let that person see inside of your house and let them know that you don't need anything and they don't need to come back. Time for you to leave. Don't need anything here. No reason for you to come back. So, folks, if you see something, say something.
Preferably while you're shooting back.
Thanks for joining us at the Self-Defense Report podcast. Have a great day. All right.
Nice.
Yeah, you hold that pose. Was that blue steel that I just saw there?
It's okay. We got to have at least one blooper for the end of the video.
Yeah.
Here, let's start again.
I was until you talked over me, fucker. All right. Hi, and welcome to the Self-Defense. You're killing me. I'm going to choke you out through the screen. All right, hold on.
Check us out online and on audio. Links are in the description.